Most people look at a backyard and see a lawn. I look at a backyard and see a livestock operation waiting to happen. And I'm not talking about a fantasy farm with acres of land and years of experience. I'm talking about animals that reproduce fast, sell faster, and can turn a quarter-acre lot into a quiet, consistent income stream, starting in your first season. Welcome back to Nature's Ledger. Here we don't just talk about living closer to the land, we talk about what that land can actually earn you. Today, I've put together 10 backyard livestock animals, including some chicken breeds you probably haven't considered, that are known for three things. They multiply quickly, they're in high demand, and they don't require a ranch to raise them. Some of these will surprise you. One of them reproduces so fast that a single pair can theoretically produce over 100 offspring in 12 months, and the market for them? Almost always sold out. So let's get into it, starting with number 10 and working our way to the animal that, in my opinion, is the single most underrated profit engine in backyard farming. Here's the thing nobody tells you when you start looking into backyard livestock. The most profitable animal on your property might not be the biggest one. It might not be the loudest one, or the one that takes up the most space, or the one your neighbors even know you have. In fact, it might be something so small, so quiet, and so consistently productive that most people walk right past it at the farmer's market without even realizing what they're looking at. I'm talking about the Coturnix quail. And if you've never considered raising them, I need you to pay close attention to what I'm about to tell you, because this little bird might be the single most efficient income per square foot animal you can raise in a backyard setting. Let's start with the number that stops most people in their tracks. A Coturnix quail begins laying eggs at 6 to 8 weeks old. Not months, weeks. Compare that to a standard chicken, which won't lay a single egg until 18 to 20 weeks at the earliest, and you start to understand why serious backyard producers don't sleep on this bird. From the moment you bring quail chicks home, the clock to your first sellable product is running, and it runs fast. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. These birds lay nearly every single day. Under good lighting and proper care, a healthy Coturnix hen will produce close to 300 eggs per year. And those eggs, small, speckled, and visually striking, are not selling for grocery store prices. At farmers markets across the country, quail eggs command anywhere from $4 to $8 per dozen, sometimes more in urban markets where novelty and perceived health value drive premium pricing. Chefs love them. Health-conscious buyers seek them out, and supply almost never meets demand. But what really separates the Coturnix from almost every other bird on this list is the footprint. These are not animals that need a sprawling coop and an open pasture. They stack, literally. Quail can be raised in tiered wire cages, in a shed, in a converted garage corner, in spaces that most livestock operations would laugh at. A setup the size of a small closet can house dozens of productive hens simultaneously. For anyone living in a suburb, a townhouse with a yard, or even certain urban areas, and this is key, Coturnix quail are legal in many municipalities where backyard chickens are still prohibited. That single fact opens the door for an entirely different audience of potential producers. The startup cost is low. The learning curve is forgiving. The turnaround from investment to income is faster than almost anything else I'll cover in this video. So before we move on to the animal that compounds faster than any other on this list, the one that can theoretically turn a single breeding pair into over 100 offspring inside of 12 months. I want to ask you something. If an animal this small can generate this kind of return, what does that tell you about how much untapped potential is already sitting in your backyard right now? I mentioned compounding a moment ago, and I want you to hold that word in your mind as we talk about this next animal, because what I'm about to describe isn't just fast reproduction, it's a biological profit engine that, once you understand the math, will make you wonder why every backyard homesteader isn't doing this already. Meat rabbits. Now, before you scroll past that idea, I need you to stay with me, because the people quietly making serious money from backyard rabbits are not who you'd expect. They're not old-school farmers with sprawling operations. They're suburban families. They're people with a shed, a small budget, and the patience to let biology do the heavy lifting. Here's the math that changes everything. A single breeding doe, one female rabbit, can produce between 4 and 8 kits per litter. She can cycle through up to 8 litters in a single year. That means one doe, managed well, can produce somewhere between 30 and 60 offspring annually. Now multiply that across 2 does, 3 does, 5. The numbers don't just grow, they compound. Each female offspring becomes another doe. Each doe becomes another engine. Within 18 months of a modest startup, a small rabbitry can be producing more animals than you have buyers for, and that's the problem you want to have. But here's what most people miss when they think about rabbit farming: the income streams don't stop at meat. Not even close. Rabbit pelts have a dedicated craft and fashion market that pays real money for quality hides. Live kits sell consistently to other homesteaders, 4-H families, and beginner producers who want to start their own operations. Breeding stock, proven does and bucks with strong genetics, commands even higher prices from serious producers who want to skip the startup curve. And then there's the revenue stream that almost nobody talks about: rabbit manure. Unlike most livestock waste, rabbit manure is a cold fertilizer, meaning it doesn't need to compost before you apply it to a garden. It won't burn roots. It's packed with nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and the organic gardening market is hungry for it. Bagged rabbit manure sells at farmers markets, on Facebook Marketplace, and through local garden centers with almost no effort. Some small rabbitries cover their entire feed costs just from manure sales alone. The footprint is small. The odor, managed correctly, is minimal. There are no noise complaints, no zoning battles, no dramatic infrastructure costs, a few stackable hutches, a reliable feeding routine, and a basic breeding calendar are genuinely all it takes to get started. What you're really building with rabbits isn't just a side income. You're building a system, one that replicates itself, generates multiple revenue streams simultaneously, and scales at whatever pace you choose. And that principle, multiple income streams from a single backyard animal, is exactly what the next entry on this list takes to a level that honestly surprised even me when I first ran the numbers. Most people who think about backyard chickens are thinking about it wrong. They imagine a few hens scratching around the yard, a carton of eggs on the kitchen counter, maybe a dozen extras to hand off to a neighbor. That's not a business. That's a hobby with feathers. And the difference between those two things comes down to one decision made before you ever buy a single bird: breed selection. Because not all chickens are created equal. And when you choose the right breeds, something shifts. Your coop stops being a backyard project and starts behaving like a subscription business. Let me explain what I mean. Heritage laying breeds, the Rhode Island Red, the Black Australorp, the Golden Comet, are not the fragile, production-optimized birds you find in commercial operations. These are animals built for consistency, longevity, and resilience. A well-managed Rhode Island Red will lay reliably for 3 to 4 years. A Black Australorp holds the world record for egg production among standard breeds. 364 eggs in 365 days under optimal conditions. These birds don't burn out in a single season and leave you starting over. They work season after season with minimal drama. Now here's where the business model clicks into place. A flock of just 12 hens, laying at average efficiency, will produce roughly 6 to 7 dozen eggs per week. At direct sale prices, which in most markets run between $5 and $8 per dozen for farm fresh eggs from known breeds, that's $30 to $50 a week from 12 birds. Modest, yes, but that's not the ceiling. That's the floor. The buyers who seek out farm fresh eggs from heritage breeds are not casual grocery shoppers. They are loyal. They come back every single week. They refer their friends. They leave reviews. They sign up for CSA boxes that guarantee them a weekly or monthly supply in exchange for prepayment, which means you're collecting income before you've even gathered the eggs. Restaurants, cafes, and boutique food businesses actively seek out small farm egg suppliers because consistency and story sell on a menu. Eggs from a local heritage flock is a line that moves product. And then there's the hatching egg market, something most backyard producers never even consider. Fertile hatching eggs from quality heritage breeds sell for a significant premium to hobbyists, homesteaders, and small hatcheries who want proven genetics without the overhead of maintaining breeding stock themselves. A single listing on the right platform can generate consistent sales with zero additional labor beyond what you're already doing. 12 hens. The right breeds. The right buyers. A simple system And suddenly your coop isn't costing you money. It's paying you on a schedule. That recurring income model is powerful. But what happens when you apply that same logic to an animal that generates income, not just from what it produces, but from the animal itself, its offspring, and everything it makes along the way? That's exactly what the next chapter is about, and it involves one of the most surprisingly versatile animals on this entire list. There is a category of backyard animal I think of as the hidden obvious, animals that have been profitable for centuries, that the commercial food industry quietly depends on, that chefs specifically request by name, and yet somehow never make it onto the radar of the average backyard producer. The Pekin duck sits squarely in that category. And the people who have figured that out are not talking about it loudly, because when supply is low and demand is steady, silence is a competitive advantage. Let me give you the case for Pekin ducks in plain numbers. These birds reach market weight typically between 7 and 8 pounds in just 7 to 8 weeks. That is a harvest timeline that rivals the fastest meat chickens on the market, but with one critical difference. The Pekin duck is not a single-purpose animal. While your meat chickens are growing out for one outcome, your Pekin ducks are simultaneously capable of producing large, rich eggs that sell at a premium in the same markets that are already paying top dollar for your quail eggs and your heritage hen eggs. One animal, two revenue streams, running at the same time. And the demand side of this equation is something most backyard producers are completely underestimating. Pekin duck meat is the most consumed duck in the United States. It anchors menus at upscale restaurants. It's a staple protein at Asian and Latin ethnic markets. Markets that are often underserved by local small farm supply and actively looking for consistent regional producers. Specialty butchers who cater to adventurous home cooks are paying premium prices for pasture-raised, locally grown duck that they simply cannot source in volume from commercial suppliers. That gap between what the market wants and what small farms are currently providing, that is your opportunity. What makes the Pekin even more compelling for beginners is the temperament. These are hardy, social, forgiving birds. They tolerate weather extremes better than most poultry. They are not prone to the disease pressures that can devastate a chicken flock. They don't require elaborate housing, a simple shelter, access to water deep enough to dip their bills, and a secure perimeter is genuinely sufficient. First-time producers who might feel intimidated by more complex livestock find that Pekins have one of the most forgiving learning curves of any animal on this list. And then there's the duckling market. Live Pekin ducklings sell consistently to backyard producers, hobby farmers, and families, particularly in spring, at prices that can offset your feed costs before you've harvested a single bird. Breeding pairs with strong growth genetics command even higher prices from buyers who want to start their own operations on solid footing. Fast to market. So dual income streams. Beginner friendly. High restaurant demand. The Pekin duck is not a consolation prize for people who can't raise chickens. It is a deliberate, strategic choice made by producers who understand that the least crowded market is often the most profitable one. And speaking of deliberate choices, the next animal on this list is one where the speed of return is so fast, so measurable, and so repeatable that serious producers treat each batch less like farming and more like running a tightly managed manufacturing cycle. If the previous animals on this list are about building systems that pay you over time, this one is about velocity. Raw, repeatable, bankable velocity. Because while every other entry in this video is asking you to think in seasons and cycles, meat chickens ask you to think in sprints. Short, focused, highly profitable sprints, and if you learn how to stack them correctly, those sprints start to feel like a salary. Here is the reality of meat chicken production that most people don't fully appreciate until they run their first batch. A Cornish cross broiler chick, purchased for under $2, will reach a harvest weight of 5 to 8 pounds in 6 to 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks. From a $2 chick to a $15 to $25 pasture-raised bird in less time than most people spend deciding whether to start a side hustle. The input cost is feed, bedding, basic shelter, and your time. The output, sold direct to consumer, clears a margin that would make most small business owners take notice. But the Cornish cross is only half the conversation, because there is a growing segment of the market: health-conscious buyers, clean food advocates, farm-to-table households who are not just buying chicken, they are buying a story. They are buying the words pasture-raised, slow-grown, and heritage breed. And for that buyer, the Freedom Ranger is the bird. Freedom Rangers take 10 to 12 weeks to reach harvest weight, which means a longer grow-out and higher feed costs. But they also command significantly higher prices, often 30 to 40% more per bird than a standard broiler, from buyers who specifically seek out slower-grown, more flavorful meat. Two breeds, two markets, both profitable, both accessible from the same backyard operation. Now here's the strategic layer that separates casual producers from serious ones: batch staggering. Instead of raising one large flock and harvesting everything at once, smart producers start a new batch every 2 to 3 weeks. By the time your first batch reaches harvest weight, your second batch is halfway through its grow-out, and your third batch is just getting started. The result is a near-continuous supply of birds ready to sell, which means continuous revenue instead of one large seasonal payday followed by weeks of nothing. And the demand is there. Pasture-raised chicken is one of the most chronically undersupplied products at farmers markets across the country. Producers who show up consistently with a reliable product and a transparent story about how their birds are raised build wait lists. They supply restaurants that put their farm name on the menu. They take pre-orders that are paid in full before a single chick is even ordered. This is not a saturated market, it is an undersupplied one. And in business, undersupplied markets with growing consumer demand are exactly where the opportunity lives. What comes next on this list is the animal that takes everything we've talked about: speed, multiple income streams, and market demand, and layers on top of it something that none of the previous entries can offer. A product that your customers don't just buy once. A product they build their lifestyle around. Every animal we've covered so far has made a strong case for itself. The quail with its speed. The rabbit with its compounding math. The hens with their subscription model. The ducks and the meat chickens with their market timing and batch efficiency. Each one impressive. Each one profitable in its own right. But this next animal operates on a different level entirely, because it doesn't just generate income from one direction or even two. It generates income from 3 simultaneous revenue streams, running at the same time, from the same animal, on the same small plot of land. The Nigerian dwarf goat is, in my assessment, the most versatile backyard livestock animal in existence. And I want to walk you through exactly why, because the numbers tell a story that most people have never heard. Start with the milk. Nigerian dwarfs are small animals, typically under 70 pounds, but their milk is extraordinarily rich, with butter-fat content that routinely runs between 6 and 10%. For context, standard dairy cow milk averages around 3 to 4% butterfat. That richness makes Nigerian dwarf milk the preferred choice for artisan cheesemakers, soap crafters, and small batch dairy producers who need high-fat milk to create premium products. A single doe in good production can yield 1 to 2 quarts of milk daily, sold raw where legally permitted or processed into artisan soaps, lotions, soft cheeses, and caramels. That milk transforms into products that sell at farmers markets and online shops at significant margins. Then come the kids. Nigerian dwarfs are seasonal breeders, with most does kidding in late winter and early spring. They frequently deliver twins and triplets. And here is where the income becomes genuinely striking. Nigerian dwarf kids, particularly those from quality bloodlines, sell for between $150 and $400 each. Registered kids with strong genetics command even more. A doe that delivers 3 kids in a single freshening has just generated between $450 and $1,200 in offspring sales alone, before you've sold a single jar of soap or a single quart of milk. And then there is the breeding stock market. Proven does with strong milk records and documented genetics are in consistent demand from new producers, hobby farmers, and homesteaders who want to start with quality animals rather than guess at genetics from scratch. That demand doesn't dry up. It grows every year as more people discover exactly what we're talking about right now. The seasonal income calendar for a well-managed Nigerian dwarf operation runs like a quiet clock. Winter breeding, spring kidding and kid sales, summer and fall milking and product sales, year-round breeding stock inquiries. There is no dead season. There is no month where the animal isn't contributing something to your bottom line, small enough to manage easily, gentle enough for children to handle, productive enough to anchor an entire small farm income strategy around. And yet, as versatile as the Nigerian dwarf is, the next animal on this list has built its entire reputation on doing one thing exceptionally well, with almost no effort required from you at all. There is a type of backyard producer I have enormous respect for, the one who has done enough research to understand that not every profitable animal demands the same level of attention, infrastructure, or daily management. Some animals need you constantly. Some animals, if you set the conditions right, largely need you to stay out of their way. And in a list filled with impressive performers, the Muscovy duck stands alone as the animal that generates the most return for the least intervention. Let me tell you what I mean by that, because low maintenance is a phrase that gets thrown around loosely in backyard farming circles, and I want to be specific. Muscovy ducks do not quack. This is not a minor detail. In suburban and semi-urban settings where noise is a real constraint, where neighbors are close and zoning is sensitive, the Muscovy's near silence is a legitimate operational advantage. They communicate in soft hisses and quiet trills that carry almost no distance. You can run a productive Muscovy flock in a setting where a single noisy duck breed would generate complaints within a week. They forage aggressively. Muscovies are natural hunters of insects, grubs, slugs, and even small rodents. Given access to a yard, a garden perimeter, or a pasture, they will spend the majority of their day finding their own food. For a backyard producer watching feed costs closely, this behavior is not a bonus. It is a genuine reduction in your largest operating expense. Some producers running Muscovies on adequate land report cutting their feed bills by 30 to 50% compared to confined poultry operations. That margin goes directly to your bottom line. Their disease resistance is another differentiator that matters more than most beginners realize. Poultry health management can become a significant drain on time, money, and emotional energy. Muscovies are remarkably hardy birds, less susceptible to the respiratory and parasitic issues that routinely challenge chicken flocks, and far less dependent on medicated feeds or intensive health interventions to thrive. They simply endure, season after season, with minimal drama. And then there is the meat. Muscovy duck meat is categorically different from standard duck. It is leaner, darker, and more intensely flavored, closer in profile to fine beef than to poultry. In European culinary markets, it has been prized for generations. In the United States, the demand is growing rapidly as chefs and food-conscious consumers discover what professional kitchens have known for decades. A Muscovy raised on pasture and forage produces a product that commands serious premium pricing from restaurants, specialty butchers, and direct buyers who know what they're looking for. A hen will hatch 2 large clutches annually, up to 16 eggs per clutch, and the ducklings sell consistently to other producers, hobby farmers, and buyers who have heard exactly what I just told you and want to get started themselves. Low noise, low feed cost, low maintenance, high-value meat, consistent duckling sales. The Muscovy doesn't ask much from you. It just quietly produces, which, in backyard farming, is sometimes the most powerful thing an animal can do. But quiet consistency is one strategy. What comes next is an entirely different one. An animal built around peak demand, seasonal scarcity, and the kind of profit margins that only appear when you position yourself in a market that is almost always undersupplied at exactly the moment buyers are willing to pay the most. Let me paint a picture for you. It is the first week of November. Farmers markets across the country are packed with holiday shoppers who have spent the last 3 weeks on wait lists, checking their phones for a confirmation message, hoping their name gets called before the supply runs out. They are not looking for a bargain. They are looking for the bird, the one raised on pasture, the one with a name on the farm tag, the one that tastes the way their grandparents described turkey tasting before industrial production turned one of America's most iconic proteins into something bland, waterlogged, and forgettable. That bird is the heritage turkey. And the producer who raises it, even in a backyard setting, even with a modest flock, is sitting on one of the most reliable seasonal income opportunities in all of small farm agriculture. Here is why the math works so convincingly. A single tom paired with 2 quality hens can produce between 10 and 15 poults per clutch. Heritage breeds, Narragansett, Bourbon Red, Black Spanish, Royal Palm, grow slower than commercial broad-breasted birds, which means higher feed costs and a longer grow-out period of around 28 weeks. But that slower growth is precisely what creates the flavor profile that commands premium pricing. Pasture-raised heritage turkeys routinely sell for 2 to 3 times the price of commercial supermarket birds. Direct-to-consumer prices of $80 to $150 per bird at holiday time are not unusual in well-developed local markets. Some producers in high-income urban adjacent areas do considerably better than that. The Q4 demand spike is real, and it is dramatic. Thanksgiving and Christmas create a concentrated window of consumer urgency that backyard producers can plan around with remarkable precision. You know when the demand is coming. You know what the buyer wants. You set your breeding calendar accordingly, you grow out your birds on pasture through the summer and fall, and you harvest into a market that is actively searching for exactly what you have. But the smartest turkey producers don't build their entire business around 2 holidays. They build restaurant relationships that generate year-round demand. Heritage turkey is a menu item that moves in January, in April, in July, whenever a chef wants to offer something that signals quality and provenance to a dining room full of people who are paying for exactly that signal. A single restaurant account that takes 4 to 6 birds per month transforms your turkey operation from a seasonal windfall into a predictable, recurring income stream. And before the poults ever reach harvest weight, there is another market entirely: breeding stock and live poult sales to other producers who want to start their own flocks but lack the tom and hen pairs to do it. Quality heritage genetics sell consistently, year-round, to a growing community of small farm producers who understand exactly what we're discussing right now. The turkey rewards patience, planning, and positioning, and the producer who masters all 3 finds themselves in a market where demand almost always outpaces supply, which is, in every business context, exactly where you want to be. What follows is an animal that operates on a completely different scale of production, one where the income isn't seasonal, the demand isn't niche, and that the volume potential is unlike anything else we've covered so far. When we talked about Nigerian dwarf goats earlier in this video, I called them the most versatile backyard livestock animal in existence. And I stand by that. But versatility and volume are 2 different conversations. And if your goal isn't just to generate income from your backyard, but to build something that scales, something that grows with you, something that can eventually replace a salary rather than just supplement one, then this chapter is where that conversation begins. Nubian and Boer goats are not starter animals. They are graduation animals. They are what you move toward when you have learned the rhythms of backyard livestock, when you understand feed management and breeding cycles and basic veterinary care, and when you are ready to stop thinking small and start thinking seriously about volume. Start with the Nubian. This is a large, distinctive breed, long ears, Roman nose, commanding presence, and it produces milk with some of the highest butterfat content of any full-size dairy breed, routinely testing between 4 and 5% fat with strong protein levels to match. For an artisan dairy operation looking to scale beyond what Nigerian dwarfs can produce, the Nubian is the obvious next step. A well-managed Nubian doe in peak lactation can produce 1 to 2 gallons of milk per day. Multiply that across 4 or 5 does, and you are no longer supplying a farmer's market table, you are supplying a commercial artisan creamery, a regional soap and skincare business, or a wholesale account that wants consistent volume at consistent quality. The Nubian makes that level of production possible from a property that most people would never imagine capable of it. Then there is the Boer. If the Nubian owns the dairy conversation, the Boer owns the meat side with the same authority. Developed in South Africa specifically for meat production, the Boer goat is the gold standard of the meat goat industry. Wide, heavily muscled, fast-growing, and extraordinarily efficient at converting forage into body weight. Boer does are prolific mothers who regularly deliver twins and triplets, and their kids reach market weight faster than almost any other goat breed. The U.S. meat goat market is one of the most undersupplied sectors in American agriculture, driven by consistent demand from a wide range of ethnic communities for whom goat is not an exotic protein but a dietary staple. That demand is not going away. It is growing every year as the demographics of American food culture continue to shift. Breeding stock sales for both Nubians and boars represent a third income channel that runs parallel to production, because as more backyard producers graduate to larger animals, the demand for quality foundation stock with documented genetics and proven production records grows right alongside them. This is the chapter for producers who are thinking 12 months ahead, who are mapping out a 5-doe dairy operation or a 10-doe meat goat herd and doing the math on what that looks like as annual income. The numbers are not modest, and the final animal on this list, the one I have saved deliberately for last, carries profit margins so wide and a market so underserved that it might be the most compelling case I make in this entire video. I saved this one for last deliberately. Not because it's the most well-known animal on this list, it is arguably the least. Not because it's the easiest to find, it isn't. I saved it for last because when you understand what the American guinea hog represents as a backyard income opportunity, everything else we've discussed today gets reframed. And I wanted you to have the full context of this video before I made that case. Most people have never heard of the American guinea hog. And that obscurity, that complete absence from the mainstream backyard farming conversation, is not a warning sign. It is the opportunity itself. Here is what you need to know. The American guinea hog is a heritage breed pig, small, docile, and built for exactly the kind of pasture-based backyard system we've been talking about throughout this entire video. They are not the massive, infrastructure-demanding commercial hogs that most people picture when they think about pig farming. A mature guinea hog typically weighs between 150 and 300 pounds, manageable, handleable, and compatible with properties that could never support a standard commercial swine operation. They are calm in temperament, excellent foragers, and remarkably easy to work with even for producers who have never raised pigs before. But here is where the conversation shifts from interesting to genuinely compelling. The pork that American guinea hogs produce is not commodity pork. It is richly marbled, deeply flavored, and categorically different from anything sitting in a standard grocery store meat case. Chefs who have worked with guinea hog pork describe it the way wine professionals describe a great vintage: specific, complex, irreplaceable. And in the direct-to-consumer market, where buyers are increasingly seeking out food with a story, a face, and a farm behind it, that quality difference translates directly into price premium. The farm-to-retail price gap on pasture-raised heritage pork is one of the widest of any protein in the American food system. Commercial pork sells for pennies per pound at the production level. Pasture-raised guinea hog pork, sold direct to consumer or through chef accounts, commands prices that can run 4 to 6 times higher. That gap, that enormous spread between what industrial production pays and what informed buyers will gladly spend, is your margin. And it is waiting for producers who are willing to simply show up in a space that is almost entirely unoccupied at the small farm level. Then, there are the piglets. A guinea hog doe delivers litters of 4 to 6 piglets, and weaner piglets, sold at 6 to 8 weeks old to other producers and homesteaders, fetch prices that can return your entire annual feed cost in a single transaction. 1 litter, 1 sale, feed bill covered. Everything after that is margin. This is the animal that rewards the producer who was paying attention while everyone else was looking the other way. And that, honestly, is the thread running through every single animal in this video. The real question was never which animal is most profitable. The real question is this: now that you know what's possible from a backyard most people are doing nothing with, what exactly are you waiting for? If you want to know how to set up your first backyard livestock system from scratch, the right way, in the right order, for under $500, make sure you are subscribed to Nature's Ledger. Because that is exactly what we are covering next. Here is what I want you to take away from everything we just covered, and it is bigger than any single animal on this list. Every one of these 10 animals shares one defining characteristic. They do not just produce, they compound. The quail that lays today is the quail that funds your next dozen birds. The rabbit doe that kindles this month is the mother of next season's breeding stock. The heritage hen flock that starts at 12 birds becomes 20, then 40, then a wait list of buyers who found you at a farmer's market and never left. The Nigerian dwarf that kids in February is simultaneously filling your soap inventory, your cheese supply, and your spring sales calendar. The guinea hog litter that sells in April pays for every bag of feed you bought all year. This is not passive income in the way that phrase gets thrown around carelessly on the internet. This is active, living biological compounding, where your initial investment reproduces itself, where your market grows because your product is real and your buyers can taste the difference, and where the backyard that most people treat as dead space quietly becomes the most productive square footage on your entire property. What I have tried to show you today is not a fantasy. It is not a highlight reel of the best possible outcomes on the best possible farms with the most experience and the most capital. Every animal in this video has been proven by ordinary people with ordinary properties and modest starting budgets to generate real, measurable, repeatable income. The only variable that separates the people who act on this information from the people who watch this video and go back to doing what they were doing before is a decision. A single, practical, well-informed decision about where to start. And that is exactly what we are going to help you make, because the most common question I get after videos like this one is not which animal is most profitable. You now know the answer to that. The question is, how do I actually begin? What do I buy first? What do I build first? How do I set up a system that works from day one without wasting money on mistakes that more experienced producers already made for you? That is the entire focus of our next video on Nature's Ledger, how to set up your first backyard livestock system from scratch in the right order for under $500. It is the practical follow-through to everything we covered today, and if this video gave you the why, that one is going to give you the exact how. So make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss it. Hit that notification bell. And before you go, I want to hear from you directly because I read every single comment on this channel. Which of these 10 animals surprised you most? And more importantly, which one are you actually going to start with? Drop it in the comments right now. Let's talk about it.